Give me a second here. Hopefully this doesn't cancel it. There we go. Okay. This is wrong. Okay. So, hyaline cartilage, fibrocartilage, elastic cartilage. Remember that elastic cartilage is in the ear, the epiglottis, and the inside of the ear. Hyaline cartilage is on articular surfaces of bones. It's in trachea, etc. Fibrocartilage is in with intervertebral disc spaces, etc. There's chondroprogenitor cells, chondroblasts, chondrocytes, chondroclasts, osteoprogenitor cells, osteoblasts, osteocytes, osteoclasts. Yeah. Hauschipp's lacunae are the scalloped structures made by osteoclasts. Remember that bone components are 70% inorganic, 30% organic, and of that 30% organic is 90% collagen, 10% ground substance, which is water and glycosaminoglycans. Then we have irregular, dense, fibrous connective tissue, which is found in the dermis. Regular, dense, fibrous connective tissue found in the cornea, for example. Okay, on to skin, also known as integument or cutis. It's the largest organ of the body because an organ is two or more tissues. And in this case, the skin is epithelium and connective tissue. It's the most visible organ of the body. It's got three layers: epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis, which is also called the subcutis or the panniculus. Now, you've probably heard of a subcutaneous injection. That's where it goes under, or that's where it goes to, the hypodermis. The epidermis is simple cuboidal to stratified squamous epithelium. It's composed of keratinized and stratified squamous epithelium. The top layer turns into keratin. Keratin is a fibrous protein. It's not cellular. It contains 4 layers or strata from deep to superficial. The stratum basal, which is the basal layer. The stratum spinosum, which is above the basal layer. Stratum granulosum, which is under the top layer, and then the stratum corneum, which is the top layer. The stratum basal is the deepest layer. It's only 1 cell thick. It's cuboidal to columnar. These are the main the stratum basal cells are the stem cells of the epidermis. They maintain the ability to divide and replace other cells. The stratum spinosum is usually several layers thick. It's spiny due to the desmosomes on it. That's crazy. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry you had that experience on the other live stream. The stratum spinosum, the desmosomes are basically how the cells connect to each other. Stratum granulosum is granular, as the name suggests, because of the presence of keratohyalin granules. And they change from cuboidal and columnar and the stratum basal to more squamous and eventually lacking a nucleus. This is physiology and histology. Okay, then we have the stratum corneum. In this, cells lack nuclei. They're flat or squamous shape, and these cells are considered keratinized or cornified at this point because it's the very outside layer of your skin. Your outside layer of skin is technically dead. It is dead skin because it's the first line of defense to outside pathogens and foreign particles. The thickness can vary though. For example, the pads of feet on a dog, those are very cornified. Hello, JJ. Okay, and then we have back to the cells of the epidermis. We have keratinocytes, melanocytes, Langerhans cells, Merkel cells. We have, hello, the Merkel cells. All we need to know about them is that they're sensory cells. Happy Labor Day. And that's all we need to know about them, really, for the purposes of this class in vet school. Okay, and then keratinocytes. These are most cells in the epidermis. They produce intermediate filaments called tonofilaments, and these combine with keratohyalin granules, which are found in the stratum granulosum, to produce keratin. Keratin can be soft, like your skin, or it can be hard, like nails, fingernails, hooves, like on a horse, or hair. Keratinocytes also produce glycolipids, which form the water-repellent barrier of skin, and cathepsin, which, if released, it causes itching. That's why when you have hair problems or whatever, like your hair follicle, I don't know, you have issues. That's why it's so itchy all the time, and it just keeps getting itchy. It's because the keratin is like not supposed to touch your skin or something like that. I don't know. I might have to review that. Melanocytes are the pigment producing cells, right? This is that brown pigment called melanin. And then Langerhans cells are resident macrophages. Again, we had the osteoclasts and the chondroclasts in the cartilage and the bone. Those were also macrophages. These are macrophages too. They recognize antigens, and they cannot be easily distinguished from keratinocytes on routine H&E staining, which is, I got to remember here, something and eosin staining. H and E. I can't remember what that is. Okay, dermis is composed of dense, fibrous, irregular connective tissue. It contains blood vessels and specialized structures like hair follicles and glands. And then the hair follicles reside in the dermis. The hair shaft itself is composed of keratin. So hair follicles are like holes in the epidermis, kind of. But the epidermis still goes around, I think. Yeah. They are continuous with the surface. They are lined by similar epithelium. And if they're on the dorsum of an animal, the hair follicle will have an associated erector pili muscle, which makes the hair stand up when the muscle contracts, like hackles on a dog or goosebumps in humans. Hair shafts could be confined to the follicle. This is what I was talking about earlier. Keratin is antigenic. It's like an antigen. If the body sees it, it will mount an inflammatory response to it. So if your body sees your hair, that's why it gets itchy up there. Anything that disrupts the hair follicle can cause secondary inflammation. Think lick granulomas. Dogs lick and 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 lick their paw, and it's just going to keep being itchy because that hair keeps getting in there. Whiskers are mega hair follicles. They're also called vibrissae or sinus hairs. And blood-filled sinuses are highly sensitive to touch. Okay, the dermis has glands, has different glands which have different purposes. There's sebaceous glands, apocrine glands, and eccrine glands. The eccrine glands are the true sweat gland in humans, and they're only in the paw pads of dogs and cats. Sebaceous glands are glandular epithelial cells which secrete sebum. Sebum is an oily substance that moisturizes the skin and hair. There are special sebaceous glands called meibomian glands. These are sebaceous glands along the eyelid. They lubricate the eye. Meibomian gland adenoma is a common benign tumor in dogs. It means it doesn't grow. It's benign. It's not dangerous. Okay. There's also sebaceous adenitis, which is an autoimmune disease that targets the sebaceous glands. And what this does is it makes the hair dry and brittle, and it opens up the body to secondary infections. Okay, apocrine glands are a type of sweat gland which releases pheromones, and they're the true sweat gland in horses. If they dysfunction in horses, the horse is unable to sweat. Anhidrosis, which means can't sweat. Anhidrosis. It's unknown why, but it's probably due to many factors. Okay, the functions of skin. It acts as a barrier. Yes, it acts as a barrier, so it prevents the loss of water, electrolytes, etc. It's severely compromised in burns, which is, that's why skin can get so hurt after a burn, especially because all that water is lost and all that. But it also blocks microbes, chemicals, and physical agents. As I said earlier, your skin is the first line of defense against all that because there's a dead layer on top, the stratum corneum. Okay, then there's immunological function of the skin, those Langerhans cells, remember? Those are the resident macrophages. Then there's the transient inflammatory cells, and then there are normal skin flora. So your skin has a microbiome just like your gut does, and just like your mouth does, just like your throat does. I mean, every part of your body pretty much has a microbiome. Your armpits, that's why armpits stink, It's because the microbiome's out of balance. Okay. The skin also has temperature regulation. What does this mean? So there's adipose insulation, like if you've got fat, right? And it's not just for fat people, sorry, but your skin is literally made of a lot of saturated fat. And what that does is that acts as insulation. Maybe not perfect insulation. We still get cold, we still get hot and whatnot, but it also, there's evaporative sweat, right? Those sweat glands. Horses have those. We do too. And then it can also bring about vascular changes. You might blush. What is blushing? That's blood rushing to the skin. Why? Why does it do that? Because when it gets to the surface, wind and air and whatever the medium is, could be water, you could be swimming, brings that heat away from the body. Your fingers also get pale as you get cold. Why? Because the blood is going deeper into the body to make you warmer, or to try and make you retain your heat. The skin also has sensory perception. Obviously, you can touch something and feel it. And it also secretes, again, apocrine and sebaceous secretions. Okay, that's it for physiology and histology for that day. Next, we have, hold on, I gotta sneeze. Okay, we have we have, hello. Okay, cells and tissues. Where do immune system cells come from? The short answer is they come from bone marrow. But during development, they come from the embryonic yolk sac, the fetal liver, and the spleen, and then again, primarily they come from the bone marrow. But what in the bone marrow? Hematopoietic stem cells in the bone marrow. Stem cells can grow to do any job in the body. That's why they're so valuable in medicine. The bone marrow supports the survival and differentiation of these stem cells, and that is controlled by hormones, cytokines, and growth factors. Okay, autocrine is where a cell's molecules act on itself. Paracrine is where a cell moves molecules to a nearby cell, and then endocrine is where a cell moves molecules through circulation to a distant cell. Neutrophils are one of the main phagocytic cells. They are important in the response to bacterial infections. They're the first cells recruited to infection sites, and their granules contain antimicrobial peptides, lysozymes, and proteases. They don't live long though. They just do their function, then they die off. They are the main constituent of pus, however, and when they degranulate, they damage the bacteria and the host tissues. Eosinophils are effective against helminth parasites. These are, just think like big worms, and these have larger eosinophilic granules. The contents of these cells are relatively toxic, and they stimulate degranulation of other immune cells, including basophils and mast cells. What they do is they attack large foreign objects. Eosinophils attack large foreign objects like worms and other large parasites. Okay, then we have mast cell, which is resident in tissues. The granules of the mast cell contain vasoactive mediators, and they are involved in acute inflammation and allergies. Basophils are rare. They're found in the blood. These granules contain vasoactive mediators as well, and these are involved in acute inflammation. Macrophages circulate as immature cells, monocytes, and they differentiate after migration to tissues. Some go to peripheral tissues to become dendritic cells, and then some have non-immunological roles like osteoclasts. They break down bone. Osteoclasts do. They don't, they're not in the immune system, but they're still macrophages. Okay, then there's circulation monocytes. These migrate in response to inflammation to carry out phagocytosis. Tissue-specific macrophage names and their locations. Okay, so there's many macrophages in many parts of the body. There's Kupffer cells, which are found in the liver, microglia, which are found in the brain and the CNS, osteoclasts, bone, chondroclasts, cartilage, alveolar macrophages in the lungs, Langerhans cells, we talked about that earlier. Those are found in the epidermis. Histiocytes, I think. Yeah. Macrophages, which are found in the connective tissue. Then there's sinus histiocytes, which are in lymph nodes, sinusoidal lining cells in the spleen, and then adipose-associated macrophages in fat tissue. Okay. Wow, there's a lot. Okay, lymphocytes. B and T cells. T cells are divided into CD4 or CD8 cells, which are helper T cells and cytotoxic T cells, respectively. And there's naive or activated or memory T cells. B cells can secrete antibodies after activation, and these are called plasma cells. And these are also activation states in B cells: naive germinal center B cells, plasma cells, and memory cells. Same as T cells, pretty much. Okay, there's lymphoid organs: the parotid, popliteal, axillary, inguinal, prescapular, submandibular organs. These are basically glands most of the time, and they are associated with the lymphatic system. But primarily it's the bone marrow, thymus, and the bursa of Fabricius. And that bursa is less relevant because the bursa is only found in birds. There are, however, ileal Peyer's patches in lambs and calves. Okay, bone marrow. We have red bone marrow, which is replaced by yellow bone marrow after a while. We have the thymus, which involutes with age and is replaced by adipocytes. We have the bursa, which involutes with age and is replaced by adipocytes. And then new naive lymphocytes is highest in young animals and lowest in old animals. That's one of the reasons why older animals have decreased immune function and younger animals have increased immune function. Okay, the thymus is a lobular gland located in the cranial mediastinum, which is in the thoracic cavity. T cell precursors basically go there and they start their journey. They're first acted on in the cortex, then they go to the medulla, and then they are finished with development afterward. Then they enter into the blood. What do they do in the blood? They go to a lymph node to look for antigen, then the lymph, then the blood, then the lymph, and it's just over and over again. They're just looking for antigens. It's basically school for lymphocytes, the thymus is. What it does, and the cortex, this is packed with immature thymocytes, which are developing T cells, and they share, they basically have an exam, okay? This is the positive selection part. T cells that recognize self-MHC, major histocompatibility complex. These T cells survive, and they move on to the medulla. The medulla is lighter stained, and it's the inner region of the thymus. It contains T cells that are more mature, dendritic cells, macrophages, and medullary thymic epithelial cells, which are shortened to MTECs. This is the site of negative selection. This is where autoreactive T cells are eliminated from the body. And this is also the home of Hassel's corpuscles. Not sure what that is. Okay, the cortex is the school classroom for T cells, basically. And then the medulla is the test before graduation. And 98% of naive T cells don't make it through. The graduation rate is like 2%. It's pretty crazy. Okay, secondary lymphoid organs, there's two kinds. There's encapsulated, then there's unencapsulated. Encapsulated, these are lymph nodes, and there's a lot of lymph nodes in the body. And then the spleen. Unencapsulated, we have mucosal associated lymphoid tissues, So malt, malts, galts, balts. Crazy. Peyer's patches, solitary lymphoid follicles, and then tonsils are another example. If you've ever heard of tonsil stones, those are, I think the stones themselves are literally like bunches of macrophages and stuff and pathogens. Lymph nodes. The lymph fluid comes from the afferent vessels. It percolates through the tissue, leaves through a single efferent vessel. And it's good to keep in mind that lymph nodes are part of a network, and they're interconnected and connected to the blood. It's basically just extra liquid coming out of the blood and then going back into the blood. That's what lymph is. What it does is it samples tissues, like things in the body, infections, dead tissues, bugs, and it takes it directly to the lymph nodes where the immune cells are. This is why, massages might make you slimmer, because it moves that lymph fluid around and circulates it, helps it circulate. Okay, the lymph node also has a cortex and a medulla. The cortex is located just beneath the capsule. It's rich in B cells, B cell follicles. It's surrounded by T cells in the paracortex, and it is where antigen presentation and B or T cell activation mainly start. The medulla is the inner part of the node, continuous with the hilum, which is the exit. The medulla contains medullary cords, which are plasma cells and macrophages. And the medulla has medullary sinuses, which are channels carrying lymph. It functions as a filtration site, basically, and it's the place where antibody-secreting plasma cells reside. So again, the cortex is like the training or the activation zone, and the medulla is the exit and the antibody factory. I guess this isn't again. It was different in the thymus. This is the lymph node. So the B cell area, again, that's the B cell follicles. When an immune response is taking place, B cells proliferate, and the follicles are then called secondary follicles. They get an area called a germinal center during an immune response. But in a pig, however, lymph nodes are different. They're inside out. The T cell area is in the cortex, and the B cell area is in the medulla. All right, Peyer's patches are unencapsulated lymphoid aggregates in the gut, or the small intestine. And they are made of B cell rich follicles surrounded by a zone of predominantly T cells. Malt, we talked about this a tiny bit, mucosal associated lymphoid tissues. Mucosal sites have irrigation so that the lymphocytes can get into those lymphoid tissues, and they are drained into the lymphatic system as well. Mucosal sites have numerous lymph nodes. Sorry. And the antigens are drained into those lymph nodes. So those malts are connected with the systemic immune system. They're all connected. And that's it. That's it for immunology for that day. Now moving on to anatomy again. Okay, talking about bones. Physics, radiographs, that's some of the stuff we're going to talk about. There are different wavelengths on the electromagnetic spectrum. There's non-ionizing low wavelength spectrum, and then there's an ionizing high wavelength spectrum. This is where radiographs are. They are ionizing and they're high wavelength. That's why they cause DNA mutation. And that's why you wear protection whenever you're taking radiographs. MRIs and ultrasound are non-ionizing. They're safe. Radiographs, mammography, CT scans, fluoroscopic procedures, and nuclear medicine examinations are ionizing. Air, fat, water, soft tissue, organs, bones, metal, they all show up differently on a radiograph. Metal is it's the brightest part that you can see, and then air you're not going to see. It's just going to be a black void on a radiograph. So, okay. It's only really, you can only see the margins of a structure if it's surrounded by a different opacity. When they're superimposed, it's much more difficult to see. I wish I could show these pictures, but I can't, because they're not mine to show. Because radiographs are 2D pictures of 3D objects, and so you need to get multiple angles of something in order to determine whether what you're seeing is like a tumor or if it's a lipoma. Two very different things. Okay, there are the radiographic views are named based on the direction of the X-ray beam traveling through the patient. There's lateral views. There's dorsoventral versus ventrodorsal, mediolateral or lateral, dorsopalmar and dorsoplantar, and then there's craniocaudal. A horse's carpus is extremely complex. Lots of bones, oh my goodness. Yeah, there's a lot. There's tendons, cartilage, wow. And so you need to get 2 really good radiographs if you want to study that. To describe any finding, you can use location, margination, number, opacity, shape, and size. Wow. Okay. Then we have more descriptions of the bones. Not a doctor yet, but I'm going to be a veterinarian in about 4 years. May of 2029, I think. Yeah. Bones, scapular spine, supraglenoid tubercle. The cat scapula is different from the dog scapula. 2 very different bones. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll try. A cat is not just a small dog. There's lots of differences between the two. Bone-wise, muscle-wise, there's many differences. Okay. Yeah, there's not much I can say here. It's pretty much just memorizing parts of the bones at this point. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, thanks for watching. That was August 22nd, I think. Thanks for watching.